Twin Cities Rider here, doing another KLR review. So if you saw the title of this video, it's why the hell did I buy one of these again, the KLR 650. And there's about 1 million KLR 650 reviews out there, and there's about 1 million videos showing all the specs of a KLR 650 and all that good stuff, but I kind of wanted to add an additional selling point that someone who has owned a KLR before would consider buying another one. And in my case, I have purchased another KLR 650 after having owned one and sold it. Which is, you know, normally when you sell a bike, that means I'm done with that, moving on to bigger and better things. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, now I'm ready for the more expensive bike. Well, in my case, I got a more expensive bike, and basically that bike got totaled because of an uninsured driver, but I definitely still have the money for an upgrade like an African Twin or some other adventure bike like that. And I was looking at those bikes and I kept going from one to the next. We got Tigers, Africa Twins, BMWs, V-Stroms, and I ended up just going right back to the KLR 650. And I'm going to kind of cover my thought process and how I got back to this old bike. So the first thing you hear with just about any KLR review or someone on an online forum is saying of it can't do anything great, but it can do everything all right. And you definitely you've probably heard that a million times if you're looking at KLR 650s or reading about them, whatever the circumstance that has caused you to be looking at this wonderful motorcycle. Well, honestly, I don't know if that's like the #1 selling point for this bike, really, because a lot of bikes are versatile today. There's a lot of new bikes that can do everything all right, but maybe not be excellent at one thing in particular. Like, we got the Versys 300X, we got the V-Strom, we got the African Twin, we got a whole host of bikes. Oh, the CB500X, that's another good one. It has a 19-inch front wheel now. I mean, that thing can pretty much do anything a KLR can do. But there's a couple attributes specific to the KLR 650 that have caused me to, you know, gain interest in it again. And I'd say the first thing is it's a single-cylinder 650 dual sport. Now, there's 3 of those out there. There's the XR 650L and there's the DR 650. And both are really, really good bikes and both have a lot of potential to be good adventure bikes. But the KLR specifically has one thing the other two do not. Actually, 2 things the other 2 do not. Actually, 3 things the other 2 do not, which make it, in my opinion, for me, a more appealing bike. And I have to say, for me, with my preferences for a motorcycle, it just matches up a little bit better. And the first thing being this front fairing that's fixed. Now, it doesn't seem like a super, you know, big deal or anything like that. And, you know, I'm sure in the aftermarket a fixed fairing for both those bikes exists, and as you can see, it's actually kind of weird how it doesn't rotate with the handlebars. I can't really show that much at speed here, but people have even complained about how the headlight always points straight because it's a fixed fairing. It sucks, man. Well, having ridden one of these suckers across the country with the fixed fairing, and then again with the handlebar mounted fairing, or windshield I suppose in that case, I can tell you, going down the highway with high winds or semis and stuff like that, it is awesome to have a fixed fairing. It just helps the bike track a little bit, and it keeps that wind from influencing how your handlebars work. Now, I'm not saying it's gonna be like a knife cutting through butter going down the highway on this thing, but it's a little bit better, it's a little bit more manageable. Alright, so the second thing the other two don't have, I would say, is the fuel tank. Again, something that can be solved pretty easily with an aftermarket fuel tank. I've purchased aftermarket fuel tanks for other bikes. My DRZ 400 has an aftermarket fuel tank. But this is a personal preference thing, and this is why I opted to get a bike that already has enough fuel capacity right off the bat. And that's just like, I'd like to keep the stock tank on. It's metal, it has the graphics that match the rest of the bike. Yes, this is an aesthetic thing that doesn't really matter a whole lot. Yes, aftermarket tanks are a little bit better in the sense that they're lighter weight and for all practical purposes make a lot of sense. But for me, I was like, man, I don't want to be messing around with getting an aftermarket fuel tank. I want to have the one that comes on the bike. So that kind of narrowed my bike list down and kept bringing me back to the KLR 650. Had a couple other things that were also important to me that were unique to this bike and not just having to do with its versatility. And that is the KLR 650's roominess. I've been on a DR 650. I have yet to ride an XR 650L. I sat on one at a dealership, and I've ridden quite a few other bikes for very, very long distances and got very, very acquainted with how much space they have for the rider. And this thing has a big old couch of a seat. I mean, you can slide forward, backwards, standing up on it's effortless. You got a lot of space there. Yeah, so this next thing doesn't really make that much of a difference as far as like how the bike performs, because this is something riders can adapt to and, you know, just change your riding a little bit. In fact, you kind of change your riding to accommodate this feature of the KLR 650, and that's its weird torque delivery. It just has a boatload of torque right off idle. It's almost like more of a passenger car. You know, this thing gets compared to like a Jeep Wrangler a lot. They call it like the two-wheeled Jeep Wrangler. The final feature that's unique to the KLR 650 that I just love is the luggage rack. I mean, this luggage rack, one, is the most effective luggage rack I've ever had come stock on any of my motorcycles. Super great grab bars for maneuvering it around and like pushing it. It's got these nice divots, and those divots make a huge difference in the sense that if you're working on your bike in the field, you have a really, really nice work area to set tools, bolts, little things you don't want to lose. It's just super, super convenient. And then lastly, it's just a big square block. It's a great surface area to put a lot of stuff. It just works really well. Those two grab handles I mentioned earlier are great for tying like your luggage on with. And there's even two hooks in the back that are great for putting a bungee cord on or whatever you might use to fasten your luggage. So the KLR on its own already has just some great, great, great features that are unique to itself, and you know, aren't like things that are comparable to other bikes. Like, and I guess engine performance is engine performance. Every bike has engine performance, but like, not every bike comes with a luggage rack. Not every bike comes with a fixed fairing. Not every bike comes with a big ass gas tank or something like that. So anyways, on to the next thing. So the next thing with the KLR is it's a basic adventure bike, and it checks all the boxes that a true ADV bike needs to. Now, there's a lot of bikes out there that are really good adventure bikes, but they don't quite have those pure attributes. And those pure attributes, in my opinion, are the 21-inch front wheel, a cradle frame, because that allows for, you know, a very, very well reinforced skid plate, having the fairing for travel, and having the large fuel capacity. Come on, KLR! Woo! Not very fast, but hey, it's still fun. Alright. So, you know, we got a lot of these new bikes out there. Like I mentioned before, the CB500X and versus 300X, and really, those can get you just about anywhere. The actual need for like super dirt performance-y things, I mean, it depends on the rider mostly, but for me personally, when I was going back to the KLR, and what drove me back to it is I just want that stuff in the most basic form, just to be sure, just in case there's like a super rocky road that I want to go down. But yeah, I mean, the KLR has all that stuff. It's got the 21-inch front wheel. It's got spokes, which are great. It's got big fuel tank. It's got the fixed fairing. It has the geometry and the ergos of an adventure bike. The difference is, it just doesn't have all that stuff super refined, which I'm not the kind of person that needs that stuff to be refined. I'm perfectly happy with just having those things and having them be alright. I would have more of a problem having most of those things be really nice, but lacking a couple key ones. Like the V-Strom, for example, I really like the looks of V-Stroms, and I really like the idea of the V-twin and a lot of things about the V-Strom, but it kept coming back to that ground clearance. And then if I was going to have a skid plate on my V-Strom, I would have to partially mount it to the engine, and I don't feel good about having the thing that's going to take super heavy impacts potentially be attached to my engine. So that was a nitpicky thing for me, that I just couldn't get behind, you know, a bike that compromised any of those like pure adventure attributes. Now, another thing about the KLR that I think lends to it being a great adventure bike, even though it's a basic one, is the fact that it's basic. I think about a basic cheap motorcycle not just being the thing that you get because you have to, because you don't have the money. I have the money to get a nicer adventure bike, but I chose a cheap one because I think of that as like an additional feature. Now when I'm looking at that road that has like some super sketchy things that I'm not 100% if I can roll up that without having a little spill or a couple problems, I don't worry about it, because if I drop this thing, it's not going to make me cry. I like my bikes. I really like my bikes. And when I have nice bikes that have perfect fairings that are very expensive to replace, I'm not cool with fucking them up and just leaving them like that. Now this thing already came with scratched up fairings. They're made of cheap plastic, so I'm okay with dropping this thing. And that just lends to my adventures being a lot more carefree. And I guess the last thing, speaking about this thing in the terms of being an adventure bike, is you really get a ready-to-go package pretty much out of the box. So it's a basic adventure bike. It has attributes beyond just being able to do everything all right. And there's a third reason I just absolutely like KLRs. And this is completely subjective. None of this is really maybe a measurable thing, and this might be just true for me, but I love this bike because it makes me feel cool, and I just think it's a neat bike. Now I say kind of the same thing for other 650 dual sports as well. I'd probably have this same subjective experience on an XR or a DR, and I kind of have it on my DRZ, but the newer fuel injection bikes and like the bikes with the fancier displays that don't have this like archaic analog display, they kind of lack this like cool feeling of like being Indiana Jones mixed with Mad Max on a motorcycle. Like, this thing just kind of feels like you're in the past doing some crazy adventures, paving new trails. Every time I hop on a KLR 650, I just feel like I'm on an adventure. I'm standing up, riding through the rugged roads of Colorado, and I don't know, it's just cool. It's definitely not the most refined thing. I mean, listen to that. Nothing about this thing's refined. But when you're trucking down the highway, battling winds, crossing the plains, and you feel every beat, every vibration of the engine just bang, 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 bang. Hey boss, we're chugging right through this, man. That's my KLR speaking to me. I love that. Riding my Ninja 650R across the plains, it was smooth, it was great. Cruising at 85, 90, not a care in the world, just sipping on my latte, having a great time. But on this thing, oh man, I feel like I'm riding a real bike. You know, giving a Ninja 650 is a real bike, and a lot of other bikes are real bikes. Probably even more so than this thing, but just the sounds and the vibrations on it, like, it's a really cool experience. And then when you're out in the wilderness, it just feels like, especially like moto camping, you just feel like you're on the right bike for what you're doing. I remember this one time I was out moto camping. I was on a long trip, kind of midway through my trip, and it was this morning. It was just, everything was covered in dew. There was a layer of fog on the forest floor, and I just saw my KLR kind of like in this tall grass, chilling off by itself, and it looked like it had just been left there for like 100 years, and it just looked perfectly in place. I remember a similar scenario with my Ninja, and it's like, wow, there's a sport bike sitting in the middle of the woods, that's cool. But this thing just looked like, oh, it's an old relic just chilling in the middle of nature. And I got all my stuff packed up that day, had a coffee made beforehand, and I was just drinking it out of my thermos, had all my gear on. About 5 minutes out, ready to go. It was a little cool that day, so I'm like, alright, I better let my bike warm up. And I also had a vacuum line plug on the bike at that point, so I had my whole startup process, and I felt like I was starting this old-timey generator almost in the middle of the woods, just flipping on the fuel switch, pulling that choke, and then just having this thing rattle to life in the most unelegant fashion, as always when a KLR 650 starts. And I remember watching the dew drop off it, like, I can't believe this thing is the thing that's getting me home, and you know, it always got me home. And lastly, I was talking about, you know, experiences, and you know, you can have experiences on any motorcycle, but one experience that I consider a motorcycling experience for me is working on my own bike. And I think that's another huge oh, you guys can get up. It's another huge plus with Oh, what's going on here? That's kind of cool. Oh, it's outdoor yoga. Get your health on, people. Yeah, working on your bike, I think, is another super rewarding part of motorcycling. Like, cars today are super complicated. I don't even know what the hell I'm doing on my Jetta. But working on bikes is something I can wrap my head around, and it's pretty easy for other people to wrap their head around bikes. But there are varying degrees of difficulty depending on what bike you're working on. Like, my Ninja was certainly like a medium. A Ducati, I would imagine, is really hard. And the KLR 650 is so average Joe friendly when it comes to maintenance. And I think that's great, because I think it could give a lot of riders that aren't maybe the most ambitious mechanics the opportunity to have a really rewarding experience working on one of these, because everything is pretty easy to do and it happens quick. It makes a lot of sense. It's easy to get to, so you're not cramming your hands in like terrible to reach places. So it'd be really easy to get a lot of satisfaction from working on one of these as well. So I mean, really, you got riding, practicality, versatility, you know, there were so many things that sold me to get a KLR 650 again, and I'm super happy I did. And I hope that helps anybody that might be also considering getting either one again or getting one for the first time. They're really good bikes. There's still a lot of them out there. There still will be a lot of them out there for a very long time, because apparently they never die. And yeah, so KLR 650s, yeah.